What's going on, folks? Welcome to Midweek Study Hall. If you're new here, my name is Philip Godfrey. Welcome. Thanks so much for joining. If you're returning, welcome back, Bible Study fam. And for everybody to make sure we're on the same page, weekly Bible study and midweek study hall are built off of the text, the scriptures in Matthew 6:33, where here the Messiah is speaking, and he tells us to seek ye first the kingdom of the Father and his righteousness, and all things shall be added unto you. And so this is our opportunity to do that, our opportunity to gather and see, seek, and serve the kingdom of the Father. We gather twice every week right now on Sundays at 8 p.m. and also on Wednesdays at noon, which you're checking out right now. So thanks so much for joining. As our assignment this year, as part of our assignment this year, we are walking through the entirety of the Bible, chapter by chapter and book by book. And so you've joined at a fantastic time if you're new here. And for everybody to be on the same page, today we're going to be looking at Second Chronicles, chapters 1 through 7. Second Chronicles, chapters 1 through 7. All right. So let's go ahead and jump into the material. As always, this is saved. These teachings, these studies are saved in a playlist on my page entitled From Creation to Revelation. So if you ever want to go back and check out any of the teachings, they will be up and they will be there. All right. And so, similar to First Chronicles, which we finished up on Sunday, Second Chronicles is a representation of what some of the material that we saw over in First and Second Samuel, and then First Kings. Tonight, we'll be looking primarily, since we're in Second Chronicles, these verses, these chapters, primarily look at first material from First Kings regarding the life of Solomon. Okay, and so I just want to make sure I set the stage so that all of us are aware of what's going on. We talked about it previously, but the chronicler here is that we don't know who actually wrote the book of Chronicles, but the chronicler here, the writer here, is writing to the descendants of Judah, of the tribe of Judah, who are now coming out of exile, Babylonian exile, that we saw them enter into at the end of Second Kings. And so they're coming out of exile, and we have the chronicler, the writer here, writing to those Jews, writing to those descendants of Judah, reminding them, as we saw at the beginning of First Chronicles, reminding them of their genealogy, reminding them of their history, reminding them of their stature and position with the Father, and how he had ultimately been curating or been crafting his covenant with them and his relationship with them from the very beginning, even in the garden. And we saw where the genealogy goes all the way back to Adam, how it goes back to Abraham and Noah, how it goes back, and showed us also David and his descendants. And so the book of First and Second Chronicles really highlight or really dive into David's life and the agreement and the covenant that the father made with David and also his son in Solomon, primarily because these descendants, these people of Judah that are coming out of exile, are very familiar with David. They're familiar with those things. They're familiar with the agreement and the promises that the Father made with David. And here, the writer is presenting those things to ensure that they, as they come out of exile, they are being reimagined into who the Father already designed and ultimately desired for them to be. Hopefully, that makes sense. And so, what we have here is a spiritual and a social kind of renewal of the things of the Father here in these people. They've been in captivity. They've been in exile. They have not been able to really in live in their culture and all these things. Those things have been kind of stripped away from them because of their slavery and their captivity. And so now they're having to be reinfused with who they are. And we see that happening through these texts, and that's the purpose of it. So hopefully that makes sense to everyone. Let's go ahead and jump in. Tonight we're going to be looking at a lot of Solomon and the beginnings of his reign and in the building of the temple. And we're going to start in chapter 1. And let's look at verse 1. I'm reading from the King James Version. And it says this: And Solomon the son of David was strengthened in his kingdom, and the Lord his God was with him, and he magnified him exceedingly. So at the end of First Chronicles, we saw excuse me, at the end of First Chronicles, we saw the death of David, and now we see and the installation of Solomon as king, and now we see Solomon beginning to grow and beginning to progress in his leadership of this nation as king. And additionally, the text tells us here that the Father was with him and continued to magnify him in this process. And as part of his process, it leads Solomon to Gibeon. Gibeon is the location where the tabernacle of the Father that Moses built in the wilderness was located, and the brazen altar was still there in that place, even though the Ark of the Covenant had been moved by David and was in the city of David at this time. And Solomon goes up to this brazen altar in the tabernacle of the Father, and he offered 1,000 burnt offerings upon that altar to the Lord. And here we see that after this large offering, the Father visits him in Gibeon at that night, and he asks him, "What is it that you would like me to give you?" All right. So the Father here is asking Solomon, he's giving him a blank check essentially, like, "What would you like from me? I will give you that." And so Solomon ultimately responds, and he requests that the Father would give him wisdom and knowledge so that he could better lead the people that he had assigned to him in this that he had assigned to him in this role as king over his chosen people. And ultimately, the Father is very pleased, appears to me to be very pleased with this response, because he tells Solomon that he's not only going to give him wisdom and understanding, but he's going to give him all these other things as well. Let's look at that in verses 11 and 12 of chapter 1. Verse 11 said, "And God said to Solomon, because this was in thine heart, and thou hast not asked riches, wealth, or honor, nor the life of thine enemies, nor yet hast thou asked long life, but hast asked wisdom and knowledge for thyself, that thou mayest judge my people over whom I made thee king. Wisdom and knowledge is granted unto thee, and I will give thee riches and wealth and honor, such as none of the kings have had that have been before thee, neither shall there any after thee have the like." And here it's not just talking about kings in Israel and in Judah. No, it's talking about kings, period. Because we know already that nations outside of the Israelites, they already had kings. And now the Father is saying none of those kings, none of the things that you've seen in those kings are going to match what I'm going to do in your life before or after. And this really encourages me to posture myself with the Father in such a way that I don't just desire the things, but I desire the right reasons for having the things, if that makes sense. Solomon here could have asked for anything, but what we see is that his heart posture was to be successful in the role that the Father had placed him in, was to fulfill the assignment and execute the assignment successfully that the Father had given him. And to do that, he knew that he needed wisdom and knowledge, because the Father had given him his people and he wanted them to be led a specific way. And to do that, he needed the Father's mind to be operating through his mind so that he could do that successfully. And the Father said, because you've asked not for all this other stuff, not for this carnal stuff, not for riches and wealth, and there's nothing wrong with having that, and honor and the head of thy enemies, and none of any of those things. You didn't ask for that. You asked for an opportunity to better yourself so that you can better lead my people. I'm going to give you all of these things. I'm going to give you what you asked for and something else, and more. And so I encourage us all to really search ourselves and determine if we are asking for something from the proper posture. All right. And as the chapter ends, we see the Father beginning to fulfill the promise that he made to Solomon. Solomon begins to amass wealth, and he begins to have establish alliances as he continues to elevate in his process as king. All right. Which moves us into chapter 2. At the end of First Chronicles on Sunday, we talked very heavily about David and his assignment, or his desire to build the Father a house. Okay, David, made the statement that he had built a permanent home for himself, and he dwelt in a permanent structure, a permanent home. But the Father's presence, the Ark of the Covenant, still dwelt in tents behind curtains, or in a tabernacle. And David desired to build a house for the Lord. But ultimately, the Father determined that this was not for him. This was not the assignment that he had for him. It was an assignment that he would give to his son, Solomon. And we saw David go through a preparation process, getting things aligned so that Solomon could be successful in his assignment from the Father. In chapter 2, what we see here in Second Chronicles, we see Solomon began to prepare for the assignment as well. It starts by telling us, I believe in the first chapter, that Solomon purposed it, he determined it within himself to build a house for the Father and a personal house for himself. This is important, and I feel like I feel like we miss it here. The first thing that Solomon did wasn't start building. The first thing that Solomon did wasn't even preparing. The first thing he did was make an internal decision that this is what he was going to do, and he was going to complete this task. And so often we begin things without internally making a decision, without internally severing every other option and setting our course towards the one thing, the assignment that the Father has given us in that season. He determined, he made an inward decision that he was going to complete. He was going to build a house for the Father and a house for himself. And we know that ultimately this assignment it had been divinely given to him by the Father and prepared for him by his Father, as we talked about previously. And so to complete this assignment, he of building the house for the Father, he amasses a workforce, a large workforce. He speaks also with Hiram, who's a nearby king, and he asks him to work alongside him, just like he worked alongside his father David, and declares that this house for the Father must be great, okay? Because he is the God greater than all the others. I, would paraphrase that, or would challenge that a little bit to say he's the only true living God. But here what Solomon is saying, he's saying that, hey, and I'm just summarizing it for you, I'm trying to get it over across to you, okay? What Solomon is saying here is that I'm going to complete this assignment in such a way that the manifest glory of the Father is seen in this house because of his position as God in the earth, in this realm, that he is the God above all others. And so this house will be the house above every other house. Every other house that had been built for a God, a false deity, a little g God, an idol somewhere else is not going to match and is not going to exceed the house that I build for the Father. Why is this important? We must build our assignments. We must complete our assignments in such a way that they mirror the manifest glory and presence of the Father. This should be our mindset, that I'm not just building something to get it done. No, I'm building it in such a way that the Father gets the glory, so that every other little God that is still out there today is not going to look better than my yes to the Father. Does that make sense? I'm not going to let somebody else's yes to their God look better than my yes to my assignment to my God, the only true living God. Okay? And that should be our posture. I'm not going to ask you, is it your posture? That should be our posture. I am excited already. Let's keep going. And so as chapter 2 ends, we see Hiram, promising to assist Solomon. He sends some skilled workers to help those that were skilled in like metal work and all these things and stone work and all that. And then he explained to Solomon the process that he would use for shipping some of the materials, primarily the timber, into the country that he could use for building the home. Let's move into chapter 3. We saw in chapter 2 the preparation. In chapter 3, what we see here is the actual building, the actual construction begins on the house. Let's look at verses 1 and 2. In verse 1, it says this: Then Solomon began to build the house of the Lord at Jerusalem in Mount Moriah, where the Lord appeared unto David his father, in the place that David had prepared, in the threshing floor of Ornan the Jebusite. And he began to build in the 2nd day of the 2nd month in the 4th year of his reign. So the chapter begins here by telling us that Solomon starts the when and where he starts the construction for the house, the temple of the Lord, and then it transitions to sharing the details, some of the mostly like the external details of the house. Talks about the dimensions, talks about the materials that were used in the construction, the images that were placed in the house, primarily like cherubims, and so you can always go back. I'm just giving us a summary about these. You can always go back and do a deep dive on it yourself. And so chapter 3 primarily talks about the external dimensions of the home. And as we move into chapter 4, it talks about the internal kind of furnishings of the temple. So it talks about the altar and how he made the altar. It talks about the lavers, the candlesticks, the tables, the pots, the lamps, all those different types of things is what we find detailed out in chapter 4. And in chapter 5, Solomon has finished the construction of the temple, and now he is bringing in the Ark of the Covenant. So let's look at that, chapter 5, verse 1. And it says this: "Thus all the work that Solomon made for the house of the Lord was finished. And Solomon brought in all the things that David his father had dedicated, and the silver and the gold and all the instruments put he among the treasures of the house of God." And so we see here that Solomon has completed the construction of the temple. He's brought in all the dedicated things that have been set aside and sanctified for the temple. And now he assembles all of the leaders. After that, he assembles all of the leaders of the nation and the Levites, and they bring the Ark of the Covenant from Zion up to the house of the Father that they have now completed in Mount Moriah. The Levites come and bring the ark into the house, and when they left out of the holy place, the text tells us that the glory of the Father filled the house that they had built for him. All right. And now they have the glory and the manifest presence of the Father dwelling in this house. And as we move into chapter 6, we see Solomon decreeing a blessing upon the nation of Israel as part of that blessing, he reminds them of who they are in the eyes of the Father. After this blessing, Solomon prays a prayer and dedicates the house, the temple, to the Father. All right, let's look at some of that in 2 Chronicles 6, verses 14 and 15. In verse 14 says, "And said, O Lord God of Israel, there is no God like thee in the heaven nor in the earth, which keepeth covenant, and showest mercy unto thy servants that walk before thee with all their hearts. Thou which hast kept with thy servant David, my father, that which thou hast promised him, and spakest with thy mouth, and hast fulfilled it with thine hand, as it is this day." And so what we see here now is this is important for the writer to remind these descendants of Judah about, because what we have here, Solomon is telling the Father as part of this prayer that no, you are a God who keeps covenant. And this is important for us to remember as well, that there are promises that the Father has made you. The Father not only has made you in his word, but there are promises that the Father has made you personally. And he is a Father who keeps his word. He keeps covenant. He keeps his promises. He keeps his agreements. And we can stand on that. And we see Solomon reminding the Father of this. And through that, the chronicler, the writer here, reminding the descendants, the people of Israel, this as well. This is what should anchor us, that he is a God, he is a Father who keeps his word. He cannot lie. He does not change. All right. And so let me keep going. I got down a little rabbit hole there. And after this, he goes on to state that Solomon goes on to state in his prayer, like, what will be available to the people of the Father as long as they are diligent and in alignment with him, and his presence will be there, how his presence will be, in this dwelling in this place, and what will also happen if they turn away, and how even if his presence leaves, what will happen. And so this moves us into chapter 7. All right, chapter 7. Chapter 7 begins by telling us that once Solomon had ended his prayers and blessings, that the glory of the Father again filled the house. Let's look at that in verses 1 through 3. Now, when Solomon had made an end of praying, the fire came down from heaven and consumed the burnt offerings and sacrifices, and the glory of the Lord filled the house. And the priest could not enter into the house of the Lord, because the glory of the Lord had filled the house. His presence was so thick, was so heavy, that they couldn't even go into the house. Verse 3, "And when all the children of Israel saw how the fire came down and the glory of the Lord upon the house, they bowed themselves with their faces to the ground upon the pavement, and worshiped and praised the Lord, saying, For he is good, and his mercy endureth forever." This is also important. The Father is a merciful Father. And here he's showing his mercy to them. that even though they had messed up, even though they had made mistakes, even though they had fallen away, even though they had been disobedient, we still see here the Father being merciful and dwelling amongst his people. It tells us here that Solomon, that they kept a feast of dedication over this house for 7 days, and how Solomon offered 22,000 oxen and 120,000 sheep. This was a sacrificial, an abundant offering that he gave to the Father. And after this huge offering, after this, the presence of the Father filling the house, what we see here is just like at Gibeon, after he had offered that large offering, that large sacrifice, the Father appears to Solomon again by night, and he has this conversation with him. Okay, and we're going to read chapter 7, verses 12 through 22. All right, and then we'll finish up. This is the Father now talking to Solomon again after they have completed all of the dedications and the prayers, and the temple's finished. The ark is there. They have sacrificed and offered on the throne, and now we have this here. All right, verse 12. And the Lord appeared to Solomon by night and said unto him, I have heard thy prayer, and have chosen this place to myself for an house of sacrifice. If I shut up the heaven, that there be no rain, or if I command the locusts to devour the land, or if I send pestilence among my people, if my people, he's talking to Solomon now, if my people who are called by my name shall humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then after these things, this is conditional, after these things are done, then will I hear from heaven and will forgive their sin and will heal their land. Let me stop there. What we have here is the Father telling Solomon that even if you see the judgment, even if I have to send judgment upon this land, upon this nation, upon my people, because of the decisions and the things that they've done and the decisions that they made, a lot of times we think that the Father is upset with us. The reality is not that the Father is upset with us, is that there are consequences to decisions that we make. And this is what he's telling them: when you begin to see the consequences of the decisions and the disobedience, then if my people, which are called by my name, will humble themselves, will repent, will acknowledge that they have strayed away, will acknowledge the disobedience and the transgressing of the law, if they will acknowledge those things, then I will hear them. Okay, let's move on to verse 15. Now mine eyes shall be open and my ears attent unto the prayer that is made in this place. For now I have chosen and sanctified this house, that my name may be there forever, and my eyes and my heart shall be there perpetually. And as for thee, if thou wilt walk before me as David thy father walked, and do according to all that I have commanded thee, and shalt observe my statutes and judgments, then I will establish the throne of thy kingdom, according as I have covenanted with David thy father, saying, there shall not fail thee a man to be ruler in Israel. But if you turn away and forsake my statutes and my commandments, so this is conditional as well. Well, it's not necessarily conditional. It's just telling them what will happen if in these situations. So it says, but if you turn away. If you don't turn away, you get the previous things. But if you do, this is what you get. And forsake my statutes and my covenants, which I have set before you, and shall go and serve other gods and worship them. Then will I pluck them up by the roots out of my land, which I have given them. And this house, which is I have sanctified for my name, will I cast out of my sight, and will make it a proverb and a byword among all nations. And this house which is high shall be an astonishment to everyone that passeth by it, so that he shall say, why hath the Lord done thus unto this land and unto this house? And it shall be answered, because they forsook the Lord, the God of their fathers, which brought them forth out of the land of Egypt, and laid hold on other gods, and worshipped them and served them. Therefore hath he brought all this evil upon them. And we saw some of that. We saw some of the fulfillment of this as we moved through First and Second Kings, and the continued degradation of and eroding of the alignment of the Father's laws and commandments and statutes in the nation of Israel and in Judah. Judah did a little better for a little longer, but ultimately they fell. And we see them going into, becoming a proverb, becoming a byword, going into captivity because of the decisions that they have made. Okay. And so this was important for them to hear from the writer, because they also needed to see that the Father had been faithful to his word. And if he had been faithful to his word, he will continue to be faithful to his word. Okay. So that's all I got for you guys today. Thanks so much for joining Midweek Study Hall. If you feel led to give or you need to reach out to me, that information is in the description box below. I will see you guys on Sunday. We'll be looking at Second Chronicles 8 to probably around like I don't know, like 22 somewhere in there, 8 to 25 somewhere in there. We'll be looking at a few more things in Second Chronicles. So just read as far as you can get. I haven't nailed it down just yet, and we'll jump in and join in again on Sunday at 8 p.m. All right. Listen, I love you. I love you. But more important than that, the Father loves you. Let him love you, okay? Start before you're ready and don't stop. I'll see you guys next time.